Good afternoon, everyone. Unlike most of you in this room who are a digital native, I am a digital immigrant myself, so I come from an age that looks too far in the past where we used the rotary dial phones. But truth be told that I never grew up to become an entrepreneur. I never wanted to become an entrepreneur, or for that matter, I didn't even know what entrepreneurship was. These are the new age words, isn't it? And therefore, I've had a career in telecommunication and financial institution. And when I worked for these institutions, I felt because of the structures of these institutions, my ability, my capacity, and my will to express myself through my work was restricted. You know, because if you look at these companies, the bigger ones, they're more like assembly lines where you are told to do what you have to do. You come in the morning, you work for certain hours of the day, do the same things again and again, and you go back home. So that ability to express myself was curtailed. So I didn't become an entrepreneur to solve a problem. I became an entrepreneur to express myself. And therefore, I feel that entrepreneurship is the same as arts, music, dance, painting. It's a way by which you express yourself. And Tootle, for that matter, is a way by which I express myself to the world. You need to find what your expression is. Find a way to express yourself. Not everyone needs to be an entrepreneur. This world needs more of artists, musicians, painters, scientists, innovators, inventors, dancers. Not everyone needs to be an entrepreneur. You only become an entrepreneur if your other ways of expressions are not there. So at the age of 33, maybe it was very difficult to choose dancing. So I felt that the best bet was entrepreneurship. And that's why I'm there. But when I got into entrepreneurship, the few things that happened, you know. I was carrying this baggage of becoming a professional who had worked in a bank and had some good career trajectory behind him. And that baggage of success led to some kind of an intellectual arrogance that you can do it alone. People know you. You know people. So if you have an idea, you can actually do something. And it was because of that intellectual arrogance, possibly I quit the job. And that came from two very interesting reasons. And one of those has been just pointed out by Amit, which is called the illusion of explanatory depth, which I would rather explain it to you in more detail. You know, we human beings have this feeling that you understand the world better than you actually do. So if I were to ask you how well you know how the helicopter works, you'd say, of course, I know how the helicopter works. Or for that matter, how a zipper works, or how a bicycle works. You'd say that, I know how it works. And if I were to ask you, rate yourself as to how well you know how the helicopter works, you'd say, okay, I rate myself 7 out of 10 as to how a helicopter works. But then I ask you the next revealing question. Okay, tell me what are the materials that are used to build a helicopter? Then you go into a tangent, isn't it? I ask you the next revealing question as to tell me how the helicopter moves from hovering to moving forward. Then you're balled out. So as we try to explain the details of things, we find it extremely difficult. And it is one of the reasons why we romanticize the idea of entrepreneurship or the idea of business so much. If someone is doing it, I can do it. But you do not know the details of it. So, we need to understand this classical view of the world, the interlinkages of things, and that can only happen through of very good research and development. There are reasons to everything that happens. There's a reason to everything that you would have in your technology. There's a reason to everything that you need in your business. There's a reason to everything that you need in your marketing and branding. In fact, the logo of Tootle that you see also has a reason as to why it is that way. Right? We need to find that reason, and that can only happen through a very, very deep research and development. The second thing that actually led me to that intellectual arrogance, and perhaps it does to many of you, is also called overconfidence bias. We human beings, we tend to inflate our own abilities of knowing something better than everyone else. And therefore, you see a lot of advisors around you as to how you should be doing things, I'm sure you've seen the goal being missed by Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo in the World Cup, right? And 1 billion people around the world have shouted that he should have hit the ball this way and scored the goal. That's overconfidence bias. Only these two people know how difficult it was to score that goal at that point in time, right? 96% of the French people believe that they can kiss better than an average French. It's true. But if you were to ask them, what is the average standard of kissing in France, no one actually knows. We don't know the average, but we inflate our abilities. These are very, very dangerous signs. And if you want to be an entrepreneur, make sure that you do that research. Make sure that what someone else is doing, and make sure that you evaluate yourself better than others. And these have been the basic issues and challenges around youngsters and entrepreneurship in Nepal that I've seen. The second thing which I'd like to highlight is that we grew up in an age when the new millennia came up. And we've always been sold with this dream that if you have an idea, and a good idea of an app, you can become a next billionaire like Mark Zuckerberg or Larry Page or Sergey Brin, or these people. Now, this comes from the second wave of technology entrepreneurship that started in this era of 2000, leading up to 2013 and 14. And the basic fundamental of this growth and the romantic story that we hear about entrepreneurship of this era has been because of the reason that the growth and development of these technologies, these applications, have been fueled by the growth of smartphones that happened at an unprecedented rate over the last 2 decades. And if you look at the kind of leadership qualities that these entrepreneurs, the young ones, Mark Zuckerberg, billionaire at the age of 22, 23, Larry Page, billionaire at the age of less than 30, it happened because these people were dorm room coders who came up with an app that was led to that growth, that unprecedented hockey stick growth, because the smartphone penetrated and the telecommunication network evolved at that rate. Now, if you look at the basic foundations of these technologies that you've seen, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, and everything, you needed 3 basic elements of business, 3 basic mindsets, 3 basic things of product, platforms, and people. You just had the product, platform, and people. You had the investment coming in, and there you go, next billionaire. But entrepreneurship even existed before that, isn't it? And if you look at the likes of Steve Case, the founder of AOL, Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, people like them, they never became billionaires overnight. Because it was a long struggle for them, because they worked on creating hardwares, creating internet in itself, and it took 20 years for them to become a billionaire. Steve Jobs never became a billionaire with Apple. He became a billionaire by selling off Pixar, his second or third venture, isn't it? Now, what were the things that were required in this first wave of technology innovation? What were those? Apart from people, product, and platform, they also required some of the things like policy changes. to create an internet and to have internet to be used by so many people, you need to drive policy. And it was in 1991 when Al Gore passed that famous Gore's bill that enabled people to use internet by all the citizens of this world. They needed partnership. If you were to develop computers, if you were to develop technologies, you needed to have partnerships with telecommunication companies to develop modems that could connect it to internet. So it required a lot of partnerships. And it required perseverance because things would not happen overnight. So beyond these 3 Ps, you also needed other three Ps. And look at the kind of leadership qualities that you would have required at that day and age. It wouldn't have been done through the skills of coding, isn't it? You needed a broader leadership skills to develop these kind of partnerships, to lead people to adopt that change. And if you look at today, this day and age, something of the first wave is coming up, which people call as the third wave. And this third wave of technology innovation is going to be driven by sustainability. Now, you might wonder what it is. There are 7 billion people in this world, 7 billion. And if you look at the global entrepreneurship environment, beginning from the day and age of industrial revolution, you'd find that the products and the services that have been developed so far has only been developed for the top 1 billion people. The cars we drive, the food we eat, the cinemas that we watch, the way we communicate, everything for the top, and the houses and the buildings that we live in. But there is a current that's happening right beneath your feet. With there are 4 billion people around the world, most of them very young, are rapidly coming into the economic mainstream. And if these people consume the same way that the first 1 billion people consumed in this world is not going to be sustainable. Just imagine every one of these 4 billion people driving their own gas-guzzling diesel cars, or eating in a restaurant, and more importantly, wasting 1/3 of the food that they eat. We are not going to have a sustainable world, isn't it? So what we need in this third wave is develop products and services that could sustain this planet. We need to look at problems from a deeper lens. If Ayushi is working on Khali Sisi, she's not just solving the problem with trash. She's trying to address a deeper sustainability problem of climate change. Tootle is not just about the convenience of transport from point A to point B, but once we include the electric mobility in our fleet, we enable people with the freedom of mobility, which is different to the concept of Uber, which is about convenience of transport, because it exists in an environment that is more frugal than you have in the US. While I talk about Tootle, Uber exists in an environment where they already have credit card payments, where they already have social security. Their internet networks are very finely tuned. But while we talk about Tootle, we have none of those, isn't it? And therefore, we need to blend and create this frugal innovation. Build our platforms on frugality. If you download Uber, it'll be a 26 MB app. If you download Tootle, it's only going to be 6 MB. Because our smartphones are not all iPhones, isn't it? We need to get into this frugal innovation. That's very important. I don't know if many of you are aware that the solar panels were actually built for space. Because of the environment, they wanted to have a very good capacity and a very light source of energy that could be used. But because solar panels were invented for space, it has a wider application for this globe, right? And therefore, countries like ours can be the epicenter of this growth, of this sustainability revolution. if you are thinking of a product as a service, I refuse to believe that Nepal is a small market. I refuse to believe that. We are small geographically, but if you can develop this as an epicenter of this global sustainability revolution, we can have global markets, because there are 4 billion people in this world that think like you, that behave like you, that eat like you, that move around like you, that have their financial services need like you, which is bigger than what Silicon Valley has to offer. And I would like to quote Al Gore, who spoke during my visit to Slush last year, and he said that the world is already engaged into the sustainability revolution, which has a magnitude of industrial revolution and the pace of digital revolution. But unlike the industrial revolution that came from the factories of Manchester, or the digital revolution that came from the garages of Silicon Valley, sustainability revolution is going to come from all parts of this world. So please understand that we are at this epicenter of this global sustainability revolution and change. And that is what we need to think for the future. And this sustainability revolution is going to be driven through this next wave of technology. Unlike the growth of smartphones, now it will be having this pace of hockey stick growth through the penetration of the 5th generation telecom networks, which can transfer data on real time at 0 latency. Things like Internet of Everything, things like connected cars, connected devices, connected healthcare are going to have a profound impact in our lives. And if we can ride on these waves, we can for sure create and change in our future with this growth of 5th generation networks. And this is something that is very important. If you want to engage into the future of entrepreneurship, keep your eyes and ears open into what this next hockey stick growth is going to be like. But if you look at, again, as to what you need right now, is it going to be same as what happened to the billionaires of the second wave? No. This third wave of technology entrepreneurship, again, is going to require some kind of profound skills like leadership, communication, research and development. You'd need to have more partnerships. You'd need to drive more policies. You need to be able to persevere more. So if you want to become the next billionaire, you need to solve 1 billion people's problems. But it is right down knocking your doors. But despite the challenges and despite the future, which looks very, very complicated in terms of comparing it with our own internal abilities, I see there is something that can drive entrepreneurship. And the only thing that can drive entrepreneurship is the optimism bias. Entrepreneurs are this very rare breed of people who are hopelessly optimists, isn't it? And optimism bias is a thing where you tend to discount the market probabilities to inflate your own abilities. If you were to open a restaurant in Kathmandu, and I were to ask you, okay, tell me what is the probability of restaurants being successful in Kathmandu? And you go by the statistics, isn't it? 50%, if that's the real statistics. But if I were to ask you, what is the chance of your restaurant being successful? You'd say 100%, isn't it? We discount the real statistics. That's what happens with entrepreneurship. If you look at the failure rates of entrepreneurship throughout the world, it's more than 90%. But if you ask an entrepreneur as to what is your rate of success, he or she would say that I'm going to be successful at it. It's pretty much like getting married. I think 50% of the marriages in the US end up with divorce. But when you make the vow in the church, you say that I'll live this life happily ever after with you, isn't it? You never think of the statistics where 1 out of 2 chances that you are going to end up in the divorce. The funny thing is that you fail in that marriage and you get married again. You have the same vows. That is the spirit of entrepreneurship. And that is the bias that keeps the entrepreneurship going. Okay. But to do this, on a serious note, we need to create a culture of entrepreneurship in this country. Silicon Valley is not a place, it's a culture. It's a culture where it celebrates our ability as human beings to learn, discover, unlearn, challenge the status quo, and create things. It is a culture that does not stigmatize failure. It is a culture where people can take moonshots, and there are people who believe in your idea and your ability to do that. It is a culture where they do not wait for the environment to be ready, but create the environment, whether it is about settling in Mars, having a moonshot, or creating a transportation infrastructure that gets from New York to Paris in 2 hours. It celebrates that human culture, that human ingenuity, and everyone is driven to let an entrepreneur achieve their dreams. It does not stigmatize failure. And if we want to become an entrepreneurial hub, if we want to be the next Silicon Valley, if we want to become the real Kathmandu Valley that thrives entrepreneurship, we need to live our life not with the nostalgia of the past, but with the hope and optimism of the future. Not with the fear of failure, but with the fruits of success in future. Not from this environment of scarcity, but with a mindset of abundance. Thank you very much.